The pipe wrench slipped from my grip, clanging against the cabinet under our kitchen sink. Water dripped steadily onto my forehead as I lay on my back, trying to tighten the stubborn connection that had been leaking for weeks. Hannah had been nagging me about it every morning, her voice sharp with that particular brand of irritation reserved for husbands who don't fix things fast enough. "Why do you always have to know where I am?" Her voice drifted down from upstairs, muffled but clear enough. I froze, wrench suspended in midair. My wife was on the phone at 11:30 at night, and she wasn't talking to me. I held my breath, straining to hear more. The old Victorian house we'd bought 15 years ago had thin walls and creaky floors that usually betrayed every conversation, but tonight Hannah was being careful. Her voice dropped to a whisper, then rose again in what sounded like frustration. "I can't just disappear, Evan. People will notice." Evan. I knew that name. Evan Morrison, senior partner at Hannah's law firm, the guy with the perfect teeth and the BMW who always managed to find reasons to work late with my wife. The wrench slipped again, this time catching my knuckle. I bit back a curse, tasting copper where I'd bitten my tongue. Above me, Hannah's footsteps moved across our bedroom floor, her voice fading as she walked toward the bathroom. I slid out from under the sink and sat on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that had been growing larger each month. Just like the distance between Hannah and me. 43 years old, and I was lying under kitchen sinks while my wife made secret phone calls to her boss. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 20 years as a structural engineer, analyzing stress points and load-bearing capacities, but I'd completely missed the fractures in my own marriage. The floorboards upstairs creaked as Hannah moved around. I could picture her pacing, running her fingers through that auburn hair she'd started highlighting more frequently in the past 6 months. She'd been different lately, distant, critical, always finding fault with something I'd done or hadn't done. "You're so controlling, David," she'd said last week when I'd asked why she was working so many Saturday evenings. "Can't I have a life outside this house?" Controlling. The word had stung because it felt so unfair. I wasn't controlling. I was concerned. There's a difference, though apparently not one my wife recognized anymore. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I climbed to my feet and grabbed a beer from the refrigerator, popping it open as quietly as possible. The house had gone silent upstairs, which meant Hannah had finished her mysterious conversation. In a few minutes, she'd come down, kiss me on the forehead like she always did, and ask how the pipe repair was going. She'd smile, that practice smile she'd perfected for client meetings, and I'd pretend I hadn't heard anything. But tonight felt different. Tonight, something had shifted. The next morning, Hannah was already gone when I woke up. Her coffee cup sat in the sink, lipstick stain on the rim, and a note on the counter. "Early meeting. Don't wait up tonight. Client dinner." I stared at the note, written in her careful lawyer's handwriting. Client dinner on a Tuesday. In the 3 years since she'd made partner at Morrison and Associates, client dinners had become increasingly frequent. Funny how they always seemed to coincide with Evan Morrison's schedule. My phone buzzed with a text from my old Army buddy Jake, who ran a small construction company across town. "Poker tonight? The usual suspects are in?" I texted back, "Can't. Wife has client dinner." His response came immediately. "So? Come anyway, unless you need permission." Permission. Another loaded word, like controlling. I deleted the conversation and poured another cup of coffee, standing at the kitchen window that overlooked our backyard. The grass needed cutting, the fence needed staining, and the garden Hannah had been so excited about 3 summers ago was now overrun with weeds. When had everything started falling apart? My phone rang, interrupting my brooding. The caller ID showed Morrison and Associates. David Carver speaking. "Mr. Carver, this is Rebecca from Mr. Morrison's office. I'm calling to confirm your wife's dinner reservation tonight at Chez Laurent. The reservation is for 2 at 8 o'clock. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "I'm sorry, what?" "The dinner reservation?" Mr. Morrison asked me to confirm all the details were correct. "Right," I managed. "Thank you." I hung up and stared at the phone. A reservation for 2. Not a client dinner, a dinner for 2. Hannah and Evan. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth as the pieces clicked into place. The late nights, the new clothes, the way she'd started doing her hair differently, the phone calls and the sudden interest in privacy, the criticism and the distance and the way she'd stopped really looking at me when we talked. My wife was having an affair. I sat down heavily at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten breakfast together every morning for 15 years, where we'd planned vacations and argued about finances and celebrated Hannah's promotion to partner. The table where she'd told me she loved me just 6 months ago on my birthday. The rational part of my brain, the engineer's mind that had served me well in my career, began cataloging evidence. The unexplained mileage on her car, the new lingerie I'd glimpsed in the laundry, the way she'd started keeping her phone face down during dinner, the sudden complaints about our marriage, our house, our life together. How long had it been going on? Months? A year? I pulled out my laptop and opened our joint credit card statements, something I rarely bothered to check since Hannah handled most of our finances. The charges painted a clear picture: restaurants I'd never been to, a hotel in the next town over, purchases at Victoria's Secret, a spa day that she'd never mentioned. My hands shook slightly as I scrolled through months of evidence. Evidence of a double life I'd been too trusting or too stupid to notice. The house felt different now, tainted with secrets and lies. Every surface, every room held memories that suddenly felt false. Had she been thinking about him when she kissed me goodbye in the mornings? Had she been comparing us when we made love? I closed the laptop and walked to the living room, studying the framed photos on the mantelpiece. Our wedding day, Hannah radiant in white lace. Vacations to the mountains, the beach, Europe for our 10th anniversary. Hannah's graduation from law school, me beaming with pride beside her in my best suit. When had I become the enemy in my own marriage? My phone buzzed again, a text from Hannah. "Dinner running late. Don't wait up." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "Have fun." She responded with a heart emoji. A heart emoji, while she was out with another man. The fury hit me like a physical force, hot and consuming. Not just anger at Hannah, but at myself for being so blind, so trusting, so pathetically naive. I'd been playing the role of the devoted husband while she'd been playing me for a fool. But the anger felt good. It felt better than the hurt, better than the betrayal, better than the crushing weight of 15 years of marriage crumbling around me. Anger was something I could work with. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. If Hannah could have secrets, so could I. The Riverside boxing gym sat in the old warehouse district, a relic from the town's industrial past that had somehow survived gentrification. I'd been training there twice a week for the past 5 years, partly for fitness and partly because hitting things felt therapeutic after long days dealing with difficult clients and bureaucratic nonsense. Jerry Kowalski, the owner, looked up from wrapping hand tape around a young fighter's knuckles as I walked in. "Dave, didn't expect to see you tonight." "Needed to hit something," I said, heading for the locker room. Jerry laughed. "Rough day at the office?" "Something like that." I changed into my workout clothes and approached the heavy bag in the corner. The familiar ritual of wrapping my hands, adjusting my stance, finding my rhythm, it all helped quiet the chaos in my head. But tonight, every punch carried the weight of my anger. Every combination was punctuated by images of Hannah and Evan together. Left jab, Hannah laughing at his jokes. Right cross, her hand on his arm at the office Christmas party. Left hook, the way she'd started criticizing everything about our life together. Right uppercut, 15 years of marriage reduced to lies and secret phone calls. "Easy there, champ." Jerry's voice cut through my fury. "That bag's got a family to support." I stopped punching, breathing hard, sweat stinging my eyes. "Sorry." "Want to talk about it?" I unwrapped my hands slowly, considering. Jerry had been running this gym for 30 years, had seen every kind of human drama play out in his ring. He'd been married 3 times, divorced twice, and had opinions about women that would make a sensitivity trainer weep. "My wife's cheating on me," I said finally. Jerry nodded like I just told him it might rain tomorrow. "You sure?" "Sure enough." "What are you going to do about it?" That was the question, wasn't it? What was David Carver, structural engineer and apparently world-class sucker, going to do about his cheating wife? I don't know yet. "Well," Jerry said, tossing me a towel, "whatever you decide, make sure it's something you can live with afterward." I drove home slowly, taking the long way through downtown. Our little city looked tired in the evening light, like it was ready to give up and let the bigger metropolitan areas absorb it completely. Main Street had more empty storefronts than occupied ones, and the old movie theater had been boarded up for 2 years. Hannah had always talked about moving somewhere more exciting, somewhere with better opportunities for her career. I'd resisted because I liked the quiet, the familiarity, the way everyone knew everyone else's business. Now I wondered if that small-town intimacy was about to become my worst enemy. How many people already knew about Hannah and Evan? How many pitying looks had I missed? How many conversations had stopped when I walked into a room? I pulled into our driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at the house we'd bought with such optimism 15 years ago. We'd painted it yellow because Hannah said it looked cheerful, and we'd spent countless weekends working in the garden, planning improvements, talking about the future. Now it just looked like a stage set for a life that had been falling apart while I wasn't paying attention. Hannah's car wasn't in the garage. Still at her client dinner, probably holding hands across a candlelit table while I sat at home like an idiot. I walked through the empty house, seeing everything with new eyes. The expensive wine she'd started buying, claiming it was for entertaining clients. The new artwork she'd hung in the living room without consulting me. The way she'd rearranged the bedroom furniture, saying she wanted a fresh perspective. Fresh perspective? Right. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in my chair, the old recliner Hannah had been nagging me to replace, and tried to think like an engineer. When a structure started showing stress fractures, you had two options: reinforce it or tear it down and start over. But what if the structure had been compromised from within? What if the very foundation you'd built your life on had been slowly eroding while you weren't looking? My phone buzzed with another text from Hannah. Home in an hour. Love you. Love you. The words felt like salt in an open wound. I finished my whiskey and went upstairs to our bedroom, standing in the doorway like I was seeing it for the first time. The king-size bed where we'd made love just last weekend. Hannah going through the motions with the mechanical efficiency she brought to everything these days. The dresser where she kept the new lingerie I wasn't supposed to notice. The bathroom where she'd been taking longer showers, coming out smelling like expensive perfume. How had I missed all the signs? I heard her car in the driveway at 11:15. The front door opened and closed, her heels clicked across the hardwood floor, and then she was climbing the stairs with that careful, quiet tread of someone trying not to wake a sleeping spouse. David? Her voice was soft, tentative. In here, I called from the bedroom. She appeared in the doorway, still beautiful at 38, still the woman I'd fallen in love with in law school. Her hair was slightly messed, her lipstick gone, her cheeks flushed in a way that could have been from wine or excitement or guilt. How was dinner? I asked. Long, she said, avoiding my eyes as she kicked off her heels. Boring client stuff. You know how it is. Right. Boring client stuff. She glanced at me sharply, maybe hearing something in my tone. Everything okay? Fine, I said. Just tired. She nodded and headed for the bathroom. I'm going to take a quick shower. Of course she was. Had to wash off the evidence of her evening with Evan Morrison. I lay in bed listening to the water run, staring at the ceiling and wondering how many more nights like this I could endure. How many more lies. How many more performances? How many more times I'd have to pretend I didn't know my marriage was a sham? When Hannah came to bed, she kissed my cheek and whispered goodnight, then turned away from me like she had every night for months. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathe, feeling the distance between us like a physical presence. Tomorrow, I decided, things were going to change. I didn't know how yet, but I was done being the fool in this story. It was time for David Carver to take control of his own life. I woke up before dawn, my mind sharp and focused in a way it hadn't been for months. Hannah was still sleeping, turned away from me, her auburn hair spread across the pillow like spilled wine. She looked peaceful, innocent even, the perfect picture of a devoted wife. The irony would have been funny if it didn't make me want to punch something. I slipped out of bed and padded downstairs to the kitchen, starting the coffee maker with mechanical precision. While it brewed, I opened my laptop and began what I was already thinking of as the investigation. If Hannah could play games, so could I. Our joint checking account showed a pattern I'd been too trusting to notice before. Cash withdrawals on days when she claimed to be working late, charges at restaurants across town during her supposed lunch meetings. A hotel bill from 2 weeks ago when she'd told me she was at a legal conference in the state capital. I cross-referenced the dates with my own calendar, my work schedule, the nights I'd been at the gym or playing poker with Jake. Hannah had been careful, but not careful enough. She'd built her deception around my routine, counting on my predictability. Big mistake. The coffee finished brewing, and I poured myself a cup, adding cream while I scrolled through Hannah's social media accounts. She'd always been active on Facebook and Instagram, posting pictures of her cases, her lunches, her girls' nights out. But lately, the posts had become more frequent and more carefully curated. Photos of expensive meals I hadn't shared with her, check-ins at wine bars I'd never been to, pictures with her friend Marcy, both of them dressed up for evenings I'd known nothing about. Marcy Chen, Hannah's best friend since law school, the maid of honor at our wedding, the woman who'd spent countless evenings at our dinner table complaining about her string of failed relationships. I'd always liked Marcy, appreciated her sharp wit and her loyalty to Hannah. Now I wondered what role she was playing in my wife's double life. I heard movement upstairs, Hannah getting ready for another day of lies and performance. I closed the laptop and refilled my coffee cup, arranging my face into the expression of mild contentment I'd been wearing for months without realizing it. "Morning," Hannah said as she entered the kitchen, already dressed in her sharp gray suit, her hair pulled back in the severe bun she wore for court appearances. "Morning. Big day today?" "Deposition prep," she said, pouring coffee into her travel mug. "Might be another late night." "Another late night." "Of course." "With Evan?" I asked casually. She paused, just for a fraction of a second, but I caught it. "Among others. It's a complex case." "I'm sure it is." She kissed my cheek, the same perfunctory gesture she'd been giving me for months, and headed for the door. "Don't wait up if I'm really late." "I won't." After she left, I sat at the kitchen table and made a list. Not a to-do list, a target list. If Hannah wanted to play games, she was about to discover that her boring, predictable husband had a few surprises of his own. First stop, Morrison and Associates. I'd been to Hannah's law firm exactly twice in the 3 years since she'd made partner, once for her promotion party and once to pick her up when her car was in the shop. Both times, I'd felt like an outsider in the sleek, modern offices with their expensive furniture and hushed conversations. Today, I felt like a reconnaissance mission. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a practiced smile, looked up as I entered. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see my wife, Hannah Carver. I wanted to surprise her for lunch." "Oh, how sweet." The receptionist's smile became more genuine. "I'm sorry, but Mrs. Carver is in depositions all day. She and Mr. Morrison have been working on the Hartwell case nonstop." "Right, the Hartwell case," I said, as if I knew what she was talking about. "They make a good team." "Oh, they're amazing together," she gushed. "Mr. Morrison says Mrs. Carver is the best associate he's ever worked with. They complement each other perfectly." "I bet they do." "Well, I don't want to interrupt their important work," I said. "Maybe I'll just leave these flowers for her." I handed over the bouquet I'd bought specifically for this purpose, watching the receptionist's face carefully. Should I put them in her office or Mr. Morrison's? I know they share a lot of their case files. "Oh, Mrs. Carver has her own office," the receptionist said. "Third floor, corner suite. She's doing so well here." "She certainly is. Thanks for your help." I left the flowers and walked back to my truck, my mind processing what I'd learned. Hannah had her own office, which meant the late nights weren't necessarily about shared workspace. But the receptionist's enthusiasm about Hannah and Evan's partnership told me everything I needed to know about how their relationship appeared to the outside world. They weren't hiding it very well. My next stop was the Riverside Diner, a greasy spoon across from the courthouse where lawyers and cops grabbed quick meals between cases. I'd eaten there a few times with Hannah in the early days of her career, when she was still excited to share the details of her work with me. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and comfortable shoes, poured coffee without being asked. "You're Hannah Carver's husband, right?" I nodded, surprised she recognized me. "Thought so. She comes in here pretty regular with that boss of hers. Nice couple." Couple. The word hit me like a physical blow. "They seem happy together," the waitress continued, apparently oblivious to the fact that she was destroying my marriage with casual conversation. "Always laughing, holding hands. You can tell when people are really in love, you know?" "Yeah," I managed. "You can tell." I left money on the table and walked out, my hands shaking with rage. Not just at Hannah and Evan, but at the casual way this woman had delivered the news that my wife was publicly affectionate with another man. How many other people in this small town knew? How many other conversations like this were happening behind my back? I drove aimlessly for an hour, trying to process what I'd learned. Hannah wasn't just having an affair, she was flaunting it. She and Evan were acting like a couple in public, holding hands in restaurants, being seen together so often that strangers assumed they were married. While I sat at home like an idiot, fixing leaky pipes and wondering why my wife seemed so distant, my phone rang, interrupting my spiral of rage and humiliation. Jake's name appeared on the screen. "What's up, man?" "You sound terrible," Jake said without preamble. "What's going on?" Jake Martinez had been my squad leader in Afghanistan, the kind of man who could read people like blueprints. We'd stayed close after our discharge, bonding over our shared struggle to readjust to civilian life. If anyone would understand what I was going through, it was Jake. "Hannah's cheating on me." Silence on the other end of the line, then. "You sure?" "Positive. With her boss. Apparently half the town knows about it." "Son of a gun," Jake said quietly. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not going to just roll over and take it." "Good. You want to talk about it? I can meet you somewhere." I looked around, realizing I'd driven to the lake without consciously deciding to come here. The water was gray under the overcast sky, choppy with small waves that lapped against the empty boat dock. In a few weeks, this place would be crowded with summer visitors, but now it was deserted and peaceful. Actually, yeah, meet me at the lake. I need to figure some things out. Jake arrived 20 minutes later in his work truck, still wearing his construction clothes. He looked older than his 45 years, weathered by sun and hard work, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "Talk to me," he said without preamble. I told him everything. The phone call I'd overheard, the credit card charges, the hotel reservations, the receptionist's casual comments about Hannah and Evan's partnership. Jake listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. "How long?" he asked when I finished. "At least 6 months, maybe longer. I've been such an idiot, Jake. All the signs were right there." "You trusted your wife. That doesn't make you an idiot." "It makes me something." Jake was quiet for a moment, staring out at the water. "What do you want to do about it?" "I want to make them pay," I said, surprising myself with the vehemence in my voice. "I want them to understand what they've done. I want consequences." "Okay, but you need to be smart about it. Don't do anything stupid that's going to come back on you." "I'm not going to hurt anyone." "I know that, but there are other ways to destroy someone's life. You just need to be creative." Jake had always been the tactical thinker in our unit, the one who could see 3 moves ahead in any situation. If anyone could help me plan my revenge, it was him. "What are you thinking?" I asked. "I'm thinking your wife and her boyfriend have gotten comfortable. They think you're clueless, so they're not being careful. That's their weakness. How do I use it? Information warfare. Document everything. Get evidence. Then use it strategically to maximum effect." I nodded, feeling the first stirring of something that might have been hope, or maybe just the anticipation of revenge. "I need to know more about their routine," I said. "Where they go, when they meet, who else knows about it." "Surveillance," Jake agreed. "But be careful. Don't get caught, and don't do anything that could be construed as stalking or harassment. Just gathering information." "Right. Information is power, and right now, they have all of it. Time to even the playing field." We talked for another hour, Jake helping me think through the logistics of my investigation. By the time he left, I had a plan. It wasn't elaborate, but it was a start. That evening, I waited for Hannah to come home from her latest late meeting. She arrived at 10:30, her hair slightly disheveled, her cheeks flushed with what I now recognized as post-encounter satisfaction. "How was your day?" she asked, settling onto the couch beside me with a glass of wine. "Fine. Boring. How was the deposition prep?" "Exhausting," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Evan and I worked through dinner." "Evan and I." She said it so casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Must be a complex case." "Very. But we're making good progress." I nodded and turned back to the television, where a mindless sitcom was playing. Hannah curled up beside me, resting her head on my shoulder in a gesture that once would have filled me with contentment. Now it just felt like another lie. "David?" Her voice was soft, uncertain. "Do you ever think about what you'd do if things changed? If our life here didn't work out?" I looked down at her, studying her face in the flickering light from the TV. Was she preparing to leave me? Testing the waters for her exit strategy? "What kind of changes?" "I don't know. Career opportunities, maybe. New places to live." "Are you thinking about leaving?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I'm thinking about a lot of things lately." "Like what?" "Like whether we're really happy, David. Whether this is the life we both want." The life we both want. As if she hadn't already decided to pursue the life she wanted with someone else. "Are you happy?" I asked. Another pause. "I don't know. Are you?" It was a loaded question, and we both knew it. The honest answer was no. I hadn't been happy for months, but I'd attributed it to work stress, middle age, the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage. I'd never considered that my unhappiness might be a symptom of my wife's betrayal. "I want to be," I said finally. "So do I." She kissed my cheek and went upstairs to bed, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the growing certainty that my marriage was over. The only question now was whether it would end with Hannah's carefully planned exit strategy or with my own explosive revelation of her deception. I was leaning heavily toward the explosive option. I started following them on Thursday. Not in some dramatic movie chase scene way. I'm an engineer, not a private detective. But our small town only had so many upscale restaurants, and Hannah's credit card statements had given me a roadmap of their favorite spots. The Vintage Wine Bar on 4th Street seemed to be their regular Thursday night destination. I parked across the street at 6:30 and waited, feeling ridiculous and vindicated in equal measure. They arrived separately, which showed they had at least some sense of discretion. Hannah first, looking stunning in a black dress I'd never seen before. She chose a corner table with a view of the street, checking her phone while she waited. Evan arrived 10 minutes later, and I got my first good look at my wife's lover in his natural habitat. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, perfectly groomed, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. He moved with the confidence of a man who'd never been denied anything he wanted, including other men's wives. I watched them greet each other with a kiss that was definitely not professional. Watched Evan's hand rest possessively on Hannah's lower back as he guided her to their table. They sat close together, leaning into each other's conversation, touching frequently. They looked like lovers. They looked happy. The rage that had been simmering in my chest for days suddenly flared into something white-hot and consuming. This wasn't just an affair. It was a relationship. Hannah had replaced me, found someone better, and was flaunting it in public while I sat at home like an idiot. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. The camera on my phone wasn't great from this distance, but I got several clear shots of them holding hands across the table, of Evan leaning in to whisper something in Hannah's ear, of her throwing back her head and laughing at whatever he'd said. They stayed for 2 hours, sharing appetizers and wine, completely absorbed in each other. When they finally left, they walked to Evan's BMW together, and he opened the passenger door for her with the gallant gesture of a man trying to impress. I followed at a distance as they drove to the Riverside Inn, a boutique hotel on the edge of town that catered to business travelers and romantic getaways. I watched from the parking lot as they checked in together, Evan's arm around Hannah's waist, both of them laughing about some private joke. The sight of my wife of 15 years walking into a hotel room with another man was like taking a punch to the solar plexus. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, hands shaking with rage, before I finally drove home to our empty house. I poured myself a large whiskey and called Jake. "I found them," I said without preamble. "Where?" I told him about the wine bar, the hotel, the casual intimacy I'd witnessed. Jake listened without comment until I finished. "You get pictures?" "Yeah." "Good. What's your next move?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to confront them right now, kick down their hotel room door and make a scene." "And the other part?" "The other part wants to destroy them both." "Smart money's on option 2, Jake said. "You confront them now, you give them time to spin the story, make you look like the crazy, controlling husband. But if you're patient, if you gather enough evidence, I can control the narrative." "Exactly. Right now, they think they're smarter than you. Use that." I finished my whiskey and went upstairs to our bedroom, staring at the king-size bed where Hannah and I had slept together for 15 years. Tonight, she was in another bed with another man, and tomorrow she'd come home and pretend nothing had happened. But I'd know. And soon, everyone else would too. Hannah came home at 11:30 the next morning, claiming she'd stayed at Marcy's after a girls' night out. She was showered and dressed in casual clothes, but I could see the telltale signs of a night spent elsewhere. The slightly rumpled look of someone who'd gotten dressed in a hurry, the way she avoided eye contact, the guilty flush in her cheeks. "How was your evening?" I asked over coffee. "Fun. We went to that new place downtown, had a few too many drinks. You know how it is." I knew exactly how it was. "What did you do?" she asked, settling across from me at the kitchen table. "Not much. Watched TV, went to bed early." She nodded, already distracted by her phone. "I need to go into the office for a few hours, some case files to review." "On Saturday?" "Big case," she said, not looking up from her screen. "Evan wants to make sure we're prepared for Monday's hearing." Evan wants. Everything in Hannah's life seemed to revolve around what Evan wanted these days. "I'll probably be late again tonight," she continued. "Case strategy session." Another lie, delivered with the casual ease of someone who'd had plenty of practice. "Of course," I said. "I'll find something to keep myself busy." After Hannah left, I drove to the hardware store and bought a small digital camera with a telephoto lens. If I was going to document my wife's affair, I needed better equipment than my phone camera. The young clerk who rang up my purchase was chatty and helpful. "Taking up photography?" "Something like that." "This is a great model for wildlife shots. Really captures the action." Wildlife shots. That was one way to describe it. I spent the afternoon learning how to use the camera, practicing with different settings and angles. By evening, I was ready for my second surveillance mission. This time, I was prepared when Hannah and Evan met at Romano's, an Italian restaurant on the other side of town. I positioned myself in the parking lot of a closed gas station across the street and documented their entire evening. The photos were much clearer this time. Hannah feeding Evan a bite of her dessert. Evan's hand on her thigh under the table, the way they looked at each other like they were the only people in the world. But the most damaging photo came at the end of the evening, when they thought they were hidden in the shadows beside Evan's car. Hannah pressed against the BMW's passenger door, Evan's body pinning her there as they embraced with the desperate passion of two people who couldn't wait to get to a hotel room. I took a dozen shots of that embrace, the telephoto lens capturing every detail of their betrayal in sharp, undeniable focus. This time, they drove to a different hotel, the Hampton Inn near the interstate. I followed at a distance and watched them check in, noting the time and taking photos of them walking hand in hand across the parking lot. When I got home, I uploaded all the photos to my laptop and created a folder labeled Evidence. The images told a clear story of an ongoing affair, complete with dates, times, and locations. Any divorce attorney would salivate over documentation this thorough, but divorce wasn't what I had in mind. Sunday morning, Hannah slept late, claiming exhaustion from her busy week. I made breakfast and read the paper, playing the role of the oblivious husband while my mind worked through the possibilities for revenge. "I'm thinking of redecorating the bedroom," Hannah said over coffee, studying the room with critical eyes. What's wrong with it?" "It feels stale, old-fashioned. Maybe we need a fresh start." A fresh start. The irony was breathtaking. "Whatever you want," I said. She smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given me in weeks. "Really? You won't complain about the expense?" "Life's too short to sleep in a room you don't like." Life's too short for a lot of things, I thought, but didn't say. That afternoon, while Hannah was at her yoga class, or wherever she actually went on Sunday afternoons, I drove to Evan Morrison's neighborhood. He lived in Riverside Heights, the most expensive part of town, in a modern glass and steel house that screamed success and superiority. I parked down the street and studied the house through my camera's telephoto lens. Expensive cars in the driveway, manicured landscaping, floor-to-ceiling windows that offered glimpses of an interior decorated by professionals. This was the life Hannah wanted. This was what I was competing with. A movement in one of the upstairs windows caught my attention. I adjusted the camera's focus and felt my heart stop. Hannah was there, visible through the bedroom window, wearing nothing but a towel. I watched in sick fascination as she moved around the room, completely comfortable in another man's space. This wasn't just an affair. Hannah was living a double life, spending her weekends in Evan's house while I sat at home wondering why my wife seemed so distant. The camera clicked steadily as I documented this latest betrayal. Hannah getting dressed in Evan's bedroom. Evan appearing behind her, also in a towel, putting his arms around her waist. The intimate domesticity of two people who were clearly more than casual lovers. They were playing house while I played the fool. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling with the implications of what I'd witnessed. This wasn't a fling or a moment of weakness. Hannah had essentially moved out of our marriage while continuing to sleep in our bed. The photos on my camera told the story of a woman who'd found a new life and was just waiting for the right moment to make it official. Well, I had news for her. The right moment was going to come sooner than she expected. That evening, Hannah came home with takeout from my favorite Chinese restaurant, an obvious guilt offering. She was unusually affectionate, kissing me hello and asking about my day with what seemed like genuine interest. "I was thinking," she said over dinner, "maybe we should plan a vacation, just the two of us. We haven't done that in a while." A vacation. After spending the weekend in her lover's bed, she wanted to plan a romantic getaway with her husband. "That sounds nice," I said. "Where were you thinking? Maybe the mountains? That cabin we rented for our anniversary a few years ago?" The cabin where we'd made love by the fireplace and talked about growing old together. The cabin where Hannah had told me I was the only man she'd ever truly loved. "Sure," I said. "Let's do it." She beamed at me across the table, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd married, young and hopeful and full of love. It was probably the cruelest thing she'd done yet. After dinner, we watched a movie together on the couch. Hannah curled against my side like she used to do when we were newlyweds. She even initiated lovemaking when we went to bed, something that had become increasingly rare in recent months. But as she moved above me in the darkness, I couldn't stop thinking about the photos on my camera. The images of her in another man's arms, in another man's bed, living another life entirely. When it was over, she fell asleep quickly, her head on my shoulder, her breathing deep and even. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and planning my next move. Hannah thought she was managing two relationships, keeping both men happy while she decided which life she wanted. She thought she was in control. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Monday morning brought the first crack in Hannah's carefully constructed facade. I was in the kitchen making coffee when her phone buzzed with a text message. She was upstairs in the shower, and the phone was sitting on the counter where she'd left it while grabbing her usual breakfast of yogurt and granola. The message preview was visible on the lock screen. Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place? Same place. Their regular Monday night rendezvous, probably at another hotel I hadn't discovered yet. I took a photo of the screen with my own phone, adding it to my growing collection of evidence. Then I did something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. I tried to unlock Hannah's phone. Her passcode was our anniversary date. Of course it was. The phone unlocked, displaying months of text conversations that laid bare the full scope of my wife's secret life. Messages that ranged from sweet and loving to explicit, plans for their future together, and complaints about the need to keep up the pretense of her marriage. David's getting suspicious, read one message from 3 weeks ago. He asked about my working late again. Evan's response, just a little longer, baby. Once the Henderson case settles, we can make this official. Make this official. They were planning to go public with their relationship, which meant Hannah was planning to leave me. The vacation she'd suggested last night wasn't an attempt to save our marriage. It was probably going to be her goodbye tour. I scrolled through more messages, my anger building with each exchange. Hannah complaining about our house, our life, our marriage. Evan promising her a better future, a more exciting life. Everything she felt she was missing. I feel terrible lying to him, Hannah had written last month. It's temporary, Evan had replied. Soon you won't have to pretend anymore. Pretend. Our entire marriage had become a pretense to her. I heard the shower turn off upstairs and quickly closed the phone, placing it back exactly where Hannah had left it. When she came downstairs, dressed in her favorite navy suit, I was reading the newspaper and sipping coffee like nothing had happened. Big day today? I asked. The usual, she said, checking her phone and frowning slightly at whatever she saw there. Might be late again tonight. Of course. She kissed my cheek and headed for the door, then paused. David, are you okay? You seem different lately. Different, if she only knew how different I was becoming. Just tired, I said. Work's been stressful. She nodded, already distracted by her phone again. We should talk more. Really talk, I mean. Maybe this weekend? This weekend, when she wasn't planning to spend it in Evan's bed. Sure, I said. I'd like that. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table and made a decision. The time for passive surveillance was over. If Hannah and Evan wanted to play games, I was going to change the rules. I called in sick to work and spent the morning researching Evan Morrison, social media profiles, professional history, news articles about his legal victories. He was everything I wasn't, polished, successful, connected to all the right people in town, but everyone had vulnerabilities, and I was going to find his. Evan's LinkedIn profile revealed that he'd been married twice before, both marriages ending in divorce. His Facebook page showed a lifestyle of expensive restaurants, exotic vacations, and charity galas where he posed with various attractive women. Hannah wasn't his first affair, and she probably wouldn't be his last. I dug deeper, using the research skills I'd developed as an engineer to trace Evan's professional history. He'd been a partner at 2 other firms before joining Morrison and Associates, leaving both under circumstances that weren't entirely clear from the public record. But a few carefully worded Google searches led me to some interesting information. A harassment complaint that had been settled out of court, a malpractice suit that had been dismissed on technical grounds, a pattern of behavior that suggested Evan Morrison wasn't quite the golden boy he appeared to be. This was useful information, but I needed something more immediate, more personal. That afternoon, I drove to Morrison and Associates and parked across the street, waiting for Hannah and Evan to leave for their lunch meeting. They emerged together at 12:30, walking close but not quite touching, maintaining the pretense of professional propriety. They drove to the Riverside Country Club, the most exclusive restaurant in town, where they were seated at a secluded table on the terrace overlooking the golf course. I positioned myself in the parking lot and began taking photos with my telephoto lens. But this time, I wasn't the only one watching. A woman in a red BMW pulled into the parking space next to me, and I recognized her immediately. Marcy Chen, Hannah's best friend, the maid of honor at our wedding, the woman who'd been covering for Hannah's affair. Marcy got out of her car and walked toward the country club entrance, but she stopped when she saw me. David, what are you doing here? I looked up from my camera, caught in the act but not particularly caring anymore. Taking pictures. Of what? I gestured toward the terrace where Hannah and Evan were sharing an intimate lunch, completely oblivious to their audience. Marcy followed my gaze and her face went pale. David, I can explain. Can you? Because I'd love to hear how you explain 6 months of lies. She looked around nervously, then opened my passenger door and got in without invitation. "We need to talk." "Yes," I said. "We do." Marcy was quiet for a moment, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "How long have you known?" "Long enough. The question is, how long have you been helping her?" "I never wanted this to happen, David." "You have to believe that?" "But you knew about it." "Yes." "And you helped cover for her." "She's my best friend." She was miserable, David. She felt trapped. Trapped. In a marriage to a man who loved her. In a house we'd bought together. In a life we'd built over 15 years. So she decided to have an affair instead of talking to me about it. She tried to talk to you. You never listened. The accusation hit me like a slap. When? When did she try to talk to me? All those times she mentioned feeling restless, wanting to travel more, wondering if there was more to life. You just dismissed it. I thought back to those conversations, the ones I'd attributed to midlife restlessness, the natural evolution of a long marriage. Had Hannah been trying to tell me she was unhappy? Had I missed the signs because I was too comfortable, too complacent? "That doesn't justify this," I said, gesturing toward the terrace where my wife was holding hands with another man. "No," Marcy agreed. "It doesn't." "So why are you here, Marcy? To make another excuse for her?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'm here because I made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "I thought if Hannah got this out of her system, she'd realize what she had with you. I thought the affair would run its course and she'd come back to her senses. But that's not what happened." "No, she's in love with him, David. Really in love. And he's not the man she thinks he is." I turned to look at her fully for the first time. "What do you mean?" "Evan Morrison has a reputation. Hannah doesn't know about it because she doesn't want to know, but he's done this before. Multiple times. He seduces married women, makes them fall in love with him, then moves on when the novelty wears off." "And you know this how?" "Because I used to work for his previous firm. I saw what he did to Rebecca Walsh, to Jennifer Martinez. Both of them left their husbands for him, and both of them got dumped within 6 months. This was new information, and potentially very useful." "Why haven't you told Hannah?" "I tried. She accused me of being jealous, said I was trying to sabotage her happiness because I couldn't find my own." "Are you? Jealous, I mean?" Marcy's laugh was bitter. "Of course I am. I've been in love with Hannah since law school, and she married you instead. But that doesn't mean I want to see her destroyed." The confession hung in the air between us, adding another layer of complexity to an already tangled situation. Marcy wasn't just Hannah's enabler, she was another person in love with my wife. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I want you to stop her before she ruins her life, before Evan breaks her heart and leaves her with nothing." "Why would I do that? She made her choice." "Because you still love her. I can see it in your face." I looked back toward the terrace, where Hannah was laughing at something Evan had said, her face radiant with happiness I hadn't seen in months. Did I still love her? Or was I just addicted to the idea of the woman I'd married, the life we'd built together? "Even if I wanted to help her," I said, "what makes you think she'd listen to me now?" "Because you're her husband, because 15 years has to count for something." 15 years. 15 years of marriage, of building a life together, of believing we were partners in everything. 15 years that Hannah was willing to throw away for a man who collected married women like trophies. "I'll think about it," I said finally. Marcy nodded and got out of the car. "David, whatever you decide to do, be careful. Evan Morrison doesn't like to lose, and he has a lot of influence in this town." After she left, I sat in the parking lot for another hour, watching Hannah and Evan finish their lunch. They looked happy, content, completely absorbed in each other. Hannah looked more alive than I'd seen her in years. But if Marcy was right, if Evan was just using her, then Hannah was headed for heartbreak that would make our divorce look gentle by comparison. The question was, did I try to save her, or did I let her learn the hard way what kind of man she'd chosen over me? By the time I drove home, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to save Hannah from Evan Morrison. I was going to let him destroy her, and then I was going to destroy him. The only question now was timing. I waited until Thursday to make my move. Thursday had become their regular night at the Vintage Wine Bar, their weekly date that Hannah disguised as client meetings and case preparation. I documented 3 weeks of this routine, photographed their intimate dinners, their walks to Evan's car, their drives to various hotels around town. Tonight was going to be different. I arrived at the wine bar early and took a table near the back. positioning myself where I could see their usual corner spot but remain relatively inconspicuous. The place was crowded enough that one more middle-aged man nursing a whiskey wouldn't attract attention. Hannah arrived first, as always, wearing the black dress that had become her uniform for these occasions. She looked beautiful, confident, like a woman who'd found her true calling. She ordered wine and checked her phone, smiling at whatever message she'd received. Evan arrived 10 minutes later, and I watched their familiar ritual unfold. The kiss that lingered too long for colleagues, the way he helped her with her chair, the intimate conversation that excluded the rest of the world. But tonight, I wasn't just watching. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of photos I'd been collecting for weeks. Hannah feeding Evan dessert at Romano's, the two of them embracing in hotel parking lots. Hannah in a towel in Evan's bedroom. Months of evidence that told the story of a marriage destroyed and a new relationship built on lies. Then I did something that would have been unthinkable a month ago. I posted the photos to Facebook. Not all of them, I wasn't completely reckless, but a carefully curated selection that told a clear story without being explicitly inappropriate. Hannah and Evan holding hands across a restaurant table, walking together through a hotel lobby, embracing beside his car under the streetlights. I tagged Hannah in each photo and wrote a simple caption. My wife's new hobby, practicing law with Evan Morrison. They're very dedicated to their work. Then I waited. The response was immediate. Within minutes, the photos had dozens of likes and comments from friends, neighbors, and colleagues who suddenly understood what they'd been witnessing around town for months. Oh my God, David, I'm so sorry. I had no idea, you poor man. Hannah and Evan? I can't believe it. This explains so much about their behavior at the office. The comments kept coming, a mix of sympathy, shock, and barely concealed gossip. Our private drama was becoming public entertainment, exactly as I'd intended. Across the restaurant, Hannah's phone buzzed with notifications. She glanced at it casually, then her face went white. She grabbed Evan's arm, showing him the screen, and I watched both of their expressions shift from confusion to horror to rage. I'll try and Hannah's eyes swept the restaurant until they found mine. For a moment, we stared at each other across the crowded room, husband and wife, betrayer and betrayed. 15 years of marriage reduced to this moment of mutual recognition. Then she stood up and walked toward me, her face a mask of fury and panic. David. Her voice was tight with controlled anger. What the hell do you think you're doing? Having dinner, I said calmly. Same as you. Take those photos down, right now. Why? They're nice pictures. You both look very happy. Evan had followed her to my table, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You need to delete those posts immediately, or I'll have you charged with harassment. I looked at him with mild interest. Harassment? For posting pictures of my wife? That's a stretch, even for a lawyer. Those are private moments. In public places, I interrupted. Restaurants, hotel lobbies, parking lots. Nothing private about it. Hannah sat down, shaking. David, please, we need to talk privately. Privately? Like how you've been handling your relationship with Evan? It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The question is, what are you going to do now that everyone knows? Other diners started staring, realizing they were witnessing the Carvers' marriage falling apart. We're leaving, Evan said, putting his hand on Hannah's shoulder. No, Hannah said, staring at me. We're going to settle this. Here? Now? Evan looked around at the audience. Hannah, this is career destruction. Career destruction. I liked that. Sit down, Evan, I said. Let's have the conversation Hannah's been avoiding. I'm not sitting with you, Evan said. You're unhinged. Unhinged? I stood up, and Evan backed away. You've been sleeping with my wife for 6 months, and I'm the problem? The restaurant fell silent, all eyes on us. Hannah looked like she wanted to vanish, but Evan was regaining composure. Your marriage isn't my problem, Evan said. If Hannah was unhappy, she should have talked to me, not run to you. Predator? Evan's face darkened. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? How many married women have you seduced? How many marriages have you destroyed? That's enough, Hannah said, standing up. Stop. I wasn't done. Ask him about Rebecca Walsh, Jennifer Martinez. Ask him about those relationships. Evan went pale. You don't know anything about them. I know they left their husbands for you. I know you dumped them both. You have a pattern, and Hannah's just the latest victim. That's not true, Hannah said, but she didn't sound convinced. Isn't it? When's the last time Evan mentioned a future with you? Hannah looked at Evan, waiting for him to deny it. But Evan just glared at me, and his silence spoke volumes. "We're leaving," he said, grabbing her arm. "No," she said, pulling away. "David's right. We need to talk." "Not here, not now," Evan said, his composure cracking. "You're making everything worse." "Worse for who?" I asked. "For you? Because I think Hannah deserves to know who she's throwing her marriage away for." "And what kind of husband posts his wife's photos online?" Evan retorted. "What kind of man humiliates the woman he claims to love?" It was a fair point, and it stung. But I couldn't back down. "The kind of husband tired of being lied to," I said. "Tired of being made a fool while his wife plays house with her boss." Hannah flinched. "David, I didn't mean for it to happen like this." "But it did. You chose him over me, lies over honesty, and you're destroying 15 years of marriage rather than having one difficult conversation." "It wasn't that simple." "It was exactly that simple. You were unhappy, you should have talked to me. Instead, you decided to have an affair. Because I knew you wouldn't understand." The words burst out of her like they'd been building pressure for months. "I knew you'd try to fix it with logic and engineering solutions, like marriage is just another structural problem you can solve with the right calculations." The accusation stung because it contained enough truth to hurt. So instead of giving me a chance to understand, you gave Evan a chance to seduce you. He didn't seduce me. I made my own choices. Did you? Or did he just tell you what you wanted to hear while he was planning to move on to the next married woman who caught his eye? Hannah looked at Evan again, searching his face for reassurance that didn't come. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of unspoken doubts and uncomfortable truths. "This is ridiculous," Evan said finally. "Hannah, we don't owe him any explanations. Let's go." But Hannah didn't move. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. "About the other women?" Evan's jaw tightened. "My past relationships have nothing to do with us." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you're going to get. Now, are you coming with me, or are you going to let your bitter husband poison everything we've built together?" Built together. 6 months of hotel rooms and secret dinners, and Evan thought they'd built something together. Hannah looked between us, her face a map of confusion and pain and dawning realization. She was finally seeing both men in her life clearly, maybe for the first time. "I need time to think," she said. "Time to think?" Evan's voice rose. "Hannah, this man just destroyed both our reputations on social media. He's trying to manipulate you with lies and accusations. What's there to think about?" "Everything," Hannah said quietly. "I need to think about everything." Evan stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. "Fine. When you're ready to be rational about this, call me." He walked away, leaving Hannah and me alone at the table while the entire restaurant pretended not to watch our personal drama unfold. "Congratulations," Hannah said bitterly. "You got what you wanted." "Did I? Because what I wanted was my wife to be honest with me. What I wanted was a marriage based on truth instead of lies. And now, what do you want now?" I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She looked exhausted, defeated, like a woman who'd been living a double life for so long she'd forgotten who she really was. "I want to know if there's anything left worth saving," I said. Hannah was quiet for a long moment, tears starting to track down her cheeks. "I don't know," she whispered. "I honestly don't know." It wasn't the answer I'd hoped for, but it was the first honest thing she'd said to me in months. "Then I guess we both have some thinking to do," I said. I stood up, threw money on the table for my untouched dinner, and walked out of the restaurant, leaving my wife sitting alone in the wreckage of the life she'd chosen to destroy. The photos were still circulating on Facebook, still generating comments and shares and speculation. By morning, everyone in our small town would know that the Carvers' marriage was over. The question now was whether anything could rise from the ashes, or if we'd both burned too many bridges to find our way back to each other. I drove home to our empty house, poured myself a large whiskey, and waited to see what Hannah would choose. For the first time in months, the choice was entirely hers. Hannah didn't come home that night. I sat in my chair until 3 a.m, whiskey glass in hand, waiting for the sound of her key in the lock, her footsteps on the stairs, some sign that she'd chosen our marriage over her affair. But the house remained empty, silent except for the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the occasional creak of old wood settling. By dawn, I'd accepted that my wife had made her choice. I was wrong. At 7:30, Hannah's key turned in the front door. I heard her heels on the hardwood, the rustle of her clothes, the careful way she tried to move quietly through the house. I stayed in the kitchen, drinking coffee and reading news on my phone, pretending I hadn't been awake all night. She appeared in the doorway looking like she'd aged 5 years overnight. Her makeup was smudged, her hair disheveled, her expensive dress wrinkled. She looked like a woman who'd spent the night crying in her car. "We need to talk," she said. "Do we?" "David, please. Don't make this harder than it already is." I looked up from my phone, studying her face. "Where did you spend the night?" "In my car, mostly. Drove around thinking." "Not with Evan?" "No." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Not with Evan." She poured herself coffee with shaking hands and sat across from me at the kitchen table where we'd shared 15 years of breakfasts, arguments, and quiet conversations. "I called him last night," she said, "after you left the restaurant." "And?" "And you were right. About the other women. About his pattern. About everything." Her voice cracked. "He told me I was being hysterical, that I was letting you manipulate me with jealousy and lies. But you didn't believe him. I wanted to. God, David, I wanted to believe him so badly. But then I started thinking about things he'd said, ways he'd acted, and I realized—" She trailed off, staring into her coffee cup. "Realized what?" "That I never really knew him at all. 6 months of sneaking around, of lying to you, of destroying our marriage, and I was in love with a fantasy." The admission hung between us like smoke. Hannah was crying now, quiet tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "David, I'm so sorry." I wanted to feel vindicated, triumphant, proven right. Instead, I just felt empty. Sorry for the affair, or sorry you got caught? Both. Neither. I don't know. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I'm sorry for all of it. For lying, for cheating, for throwing away 15 years because I was bored and selfish and stupid. Why? The question I'd been carrying for weeks finally found its voice. Why wasn't I enough? Hannah's face crumpled. It wasn't about you not being enough. It was about me feeling like I wasn't enough. Like I was just David Carver's wife, living David Carver's life, in David Carver's house. It was our life, Hannah. Our house, our marriage, our choices. But it never felt like mine. It felt like I was a supporting character in your story. The words stung because they carried the weight of truth. Had I been so focused on building the life I wanted that I'd never asked what Hannah wanted? So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to become the star of Evan Morrison's story. Yes, and look how that turned out. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of 15 years and 6 months pressing down on us like a physical presence. What happens now? Hannah asked finally. I don't know. Do you want me to leave? The question I'd been dreading since this all began. Did I want her to leave? Part of me did, the part that was still angry, still hurt, still humiliated by months of deception. But another part, the part that remembered who we used to be together, wanted to find a way back. I don't know, I repeated. The whole town knows now, about the affair, about everything. I saw the Facebook posts, the comments. She laughed bitterly. I can never show my face at the office again. Did you quit? I will today. I have to. There's no way I can work with Evan after this, and the gossip will make it impossible to function professionally. What will you do? I don't know. Start over, I guess. Find a new job, maybe in another town. Another town. The thought of Hannah leaving, of our marriage ending not with reconciliation, but with her disappearing into a new life somewhere else, hit me harder than I'd expected. Is that what you want? A fresh start somewhere else? Hannah was quiet for a long moment. What I want is to go back 6 months and make different choices. What I want is to have been honest with you about how I was feeling instead of looking for answers in another man's bed. But we can't go back. No, we can't. My phone buzzed with a text message. Jake checking on me. Saw the Facebook posts. You okay? I showed the message to Hannah. Half the town is probably talking about us right now. I know. I'm sorry about that too. You didn't deserve to have your private life become public entertainment. I'm the one who posted the photos, Hannah. I made it public. Because I forced you to. Because I pushed you so far that public humiliation seemed like the only way to get my attention. She was right, but it didn't make me feel any better about my choices. What do you want, David? Hannah asked. Do you want to try to fix this, or do you want me gone? The question I'd been avoiding since the night I overheard her phone call. What did I want? I wanted my wife back. Not the woman who'd been lying to me for 6 months, but the woman I'd married, the woman who'd been my partner and best friend for 15 years. But was that woman still there, underneath the guilt and regret and broken promises? Or had she been replaced permanently by someone I didn't recognize? I want to know if the woman I married still exists, I said finally. I think she does. I hope she does. But I don't know if you can ever trust her again. Trust, the foundation of any marriage, and the thing that Hannah had systematically destroyed with months of lies. I don't know either, I admitted. Hannah nodded, tears starting again. So what do we do? I think, I said slowly, we start with honesty. Complete honesty, even if it hurts. Okay. Did you love him? The question I'd been afraid to ask, the one that might destroy any chance we had of rebuilding. Hannah was quiet for so long, I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then, I thought I did, but I think I was in love with the idea of him, with the way he made me feel about myself, like I was interesting and desirable and worth pursuing. And how do I make you feel? Safe, loved, taken for granted. Another painful truth, delivered without malice but cutting deep. I never meant to take you for granted. I know, and I never meant to need so much validation from someone else. But we both made mistakes, David. The affair was mine, but the problems that led to it, those were ours. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, maybe in our entire marriage, and it was happening in the wreckage of everything we'd built together. Where do we go from here? I asked. I don't know. Counseling, maybe, if you're willing to try. Counseling. The idea of sitting in a therapist's office, dissecting our marriage in front of a stranger, made me cringe. But the alternative was divorce, the end of 15 years, the final admission that we'd failed. I'm willing to try, I said. But Hannah, if we do this, if we try to rebuild, it has to be real. No more lies, no more secrets, no more pretending everything is fine when it isn't. I understand. And no more contact with Evan. At all. I know. And I need time. I can't just flip a switch and trust you again. It's going to take time. I know, she repeated, her voice thick with tears. However long it takes. I looked at my wife across our kitchen table, this woman I'd loved for 20 years and lived with for 15, this stranger who'd betrayed me and this familiar person who was asking for another chance. Okay, I said, let's try. It wasn't forgiveness. That would take much longer. It wasn't a guarantee that we could rebuild what had been broken. But it was a beginning, a tentative first step towards something that might eventually become trust again. Hannah reached across the table and touched my hand, the first physical contact we'd had in days that wasn't tainted with lies. Thank you, she whispered. I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze back either. We had a long way to go, and I wasn't sure we'd make it. But for the first time since I'd overheard that phone call, I thought we might have a chance. Outside, our small town was waking up to the gossip of our public breakdown. Inside, Hannah and I were trying to figure out if there was anything left worth saving. Only time would tell if love could survive betrayal, if trust could be rebuilt from nothing, if a marriage could rise from the ashes of its own destruction. But we were going to try, and for now, that was enough.